All right, welcome to another episode of Justice for the Missing. And tonight's guest is Meaghan Good, the founder of Charley Project. So, Meaghan, can you tell us what led you to develop Charley Project?
Well, the original credit goes to a woman named Jennifer Mara, who actually she founded the Doe Network as well, way back in the 90s. And she she left the Doe Network and started something called the Missing Persons Cold Case Network, which she worked on for a few years. It just covered American missing persons cases and didn't have the unidentified people on it. And then I got to know her because I was sending her information to put on that site. And I was only in my teens at the time. And when I was 17 years old, she decided to stop doing the missing persons work because it was interfering with the time that she was spending. She had little kids, you see, and she decided to give it to me. And so I ran that for like a year or so, and then unfortunately it got hacked and kind of completely destroyed. And so I had to basically start it all over and rebuild from the ground up. And I gave it a new name called the Charley Project, and I've been running it ever since under that name since I was 19 years old, since that was in 2004.
Okay. So I watched an interesting interview on the online where you talked about the name Charley Project and where you got that from. Can you walk us through that?
My boyfriend suggested I name it after a really old missing person case, and I thought of a little boy named Charlie Ross who was kidnapped in the 1870s for ransom. And the thing is, at the time, kidnapping children was just kind of not a thing. In fact, kidnapping was not even a criminal offense in the state of Pennsylvania where it happened because it just wasn't done. And his case became very, very famous. And this was the first time people really started to worry about children being kidnapped. And they never found Charlie, and his father spent the rest of his life looking for him.
Are there any other experiences that you believe happened in your formative years that kind of led you on this path of work?
Well, I've got high functioning autism. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 23, but no one was a bit surprised, let me put it that way. And one of the symptoms of autism is having kind of a obsession with a really narrow or esoteric topic. And in my case, one of my obsessions happens to be missing persons. Mm-hmm. And it was something I got really into when I was only about 12. And I've been kind of sucked into it ever since.
Well, that's a great way to use your focus on a narrow topic, because that leads me to my next question. How many cases do you currently have on Charley Project?
Open cases, I've got about 11,000.
Okay. And what do you do to obtain those new cases? Kind of walk us through how your process.
I'm constantly going through databases like NamUs and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children are the really big ones, but there's a lot of databases run by state and local police, and I'm looking through those, and I'm also going through the missing persons news every single day to see what cases are mentioned and what information pops up. And occasionally people will write me with suggestions, or even if it's their missing loved one, saying, could you add this person?
Okay. Okay. So if a family member wants to have their case on Charley Project, and is there a certain criteria that you look for before posting them?
The person has to have disappeared in the U.S. and they have to have been gone for at least a year. I have the whole 1 year thing because I'm kind of swamped as is. And if I did cases that were newer, I would not be able to keep up with anything. And so those are basically the criteria. That, and also the person has to be officially reported missing. I mean, there has to be like a law enforcement investigating and everything, because if I just put up, somebody who hasn't been in touch with their parents in a while and then they say that I say that this person is a missing person when they're not actually reported missing. I could get sued for that. And I'm not really interested in disrupting someone's life just because they happen to be out of touch with their family.
Right. And it leaves room for all of those cases where the people are truly missing, just vanished.
Although occasionally I do hear from people saying, yeah, I'm the person listed on your website and I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not missing. I'm like, here's this missing persons report. Actually, you are missing. You know where you are, but no one else does. You need to get in touch with the police and explain yourself. And I will go through the process with them and explain, if you don't want your family to know where you're at, the police are not legally allowed to tell them that. They can just say he's been in touch and he's fine and we're closing the case.
Well, that's good information to know. I didn't even know that. So is it just you maintaining Charley Project, or do you have others?
It's just me. I do everything. Although I do have an informal group of people I call the irregulars, like the Sherlock Holmes irregulars. And these are people that just have taken it upon themselves to regularly send me links to articles and other information that they get.
Wow.
It's very helpful.
Well, I mean, still yet, how many hours a day do you spend on your Charley Project?
It depends on the day, but it's not at all unusual for me to be spending 8-12 hours at the computer. My back regularly goes on strike in protest of this, and I have back pain a lot because of spending so much time at my desk.
So when you get focused in, do you find yourself kind of hard to pull away from it, or
Yes, and I'm fighting the tide. I am never going to get caught up with my work. I think a person disappears in this country every 5 seconds. You know, even if I worked on it 24 hours a day, I'm never done.
Yeah, I think statistically that's 5 seconds sounds about right. I don't know, I have to look at the stats on that to know for sure, but that sounds about right. I mean, what is it? The number annually is over 800,000, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, that's counting the number of missing persons reports taken, and these people, usually they get found pretty quickly to be, taken off the list and then replaced by others, and then you see people who have a tendency to drop out of sight, chronic runaways, that sort of thing, who get reported missing multiple times in a year, so the same person might get reported missing like 3 or 4 times in a single year. And so it's not like 800,000 people are vanishing and are never found every single year. That would be, the country would be depopulated pretty quickly.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. So you have lots of experience, obviously, with reading about these cases and the procedures and policies that go along with it. What administrative policies or government policies, laws, do you think need to be changed in the realm of missing persons?
Well, as a general rule, I think the police should do more to engage the media and engage like private citizens in help finding these people, because police departments it's like there's never enough staff there. And it seems many times when they're not releasing information, they're not really doing anybody any favors by not doing this. And if they would be more forthright about what's going on, not to the extent that they would compromise an investigation, but just some basic information that would get more people interested and also more people working on it. And it would be nice if they would be more willing to accept police reports for missing adults more quicker than they do. Because I've seen cases of the police refusing to accept a report for months or a year or more. And that's completely unacceptable to me. And furthermore, NamUs needs a lot of work. One of the problems is their failure to remove cases from their database that have been resolved long ago. The other day, I put up 25 cases on my website off of NamUs, and it would have been 30, except 5 of the cases that I was planning to put up on my website off of NamUs it turned out that these people had been found ages ago. we're talking months and months ago. One person was only missing for like 9 days before she was found, and these people are still on NamUs. Apparently there's some rule that only the investigating police department can tell NamUs to take them off, and investigating police departments often have other things to do. So even if you can present all these articles and the death certificate and everything saying, hey, this person got found, they're still not going to take it off because of this rule. I blame bureaucracy to a large extent. But right. It's supposed to be, NamUs is supposed to be a really, really great, big white hope for missing persons and unidentified people. And I'm not denying that it is a great database. I just think that there could be a lot of improvements to it. And it seems like with every redesign they do, they take away a little bit more. They used to have things like medical conditions on there, and now they don't, because supposedly because of privacy laws. And I happen to have an understanding of medical privacy laws, and that's not really how it works.
Okay. Very good points, Meaghan. Thank you for sharing that. How has this line of work impacted the person you are today?
Well, I'm not particularly afraid, believe it or not. It doesn't make me like paranoid about being grabbed off the street, because I know from all the work I do how rare that is. It's, it's much more likely to happen to you, at the hands of a person you know. I mean, even like the Elizabeth Smart case, the guy knew her, sort of. He had met her before. He knew her father. He'd gone to work for her dad, and he saw her, and that's how it happened. And it's the same thing with that guy Ariel Castro and those girls that he was keeping captive in his house. 2 of them I know for a fact he had met before. And so I'm not terribly afraid of becoming a victim of violent crime myself, although it's happened. I mean, it's happened already. I was actually raped by a stranger a few years ago. And wow. The other thing that I think has impacted me is I've got severe mental illness, and I take, right now, I think 5 different psychiatric medications every day. I always take my medications because I have heard way too many horror stories of people with mental illness who have gone off their medications, and then their symptoms resurfaced, and then they had a mental breakdown and vanished off the face of the earth. In fact, my psychiatrist has told me that he has gone through my website before and found such cases and told patients about them, saying basically, if you stop taking your medication, this could happen to you. Right. So it's maybe become like more cognizant of how important it is to keep track of my mental health.
Mm-hmm. So it has brought a level of awareness about your own personal care. But you know what I find fascinating about you, Meaghan, because I followed Charley's Project for quite some time. My sister went missing in 2001, and I remember her story being put on Charley Project, and it was the first time I noticed that all of the details about her case were listed in one place. I just find it completely fascinating that you've been able to take all of this information and put it in one spot where people could go and get the whole story. And I think you might have to be, you can't be a completely sane person to do that and maintain that all the time. Not to say that you're insane, that's not what I'm saying, but you have to have a level of care and just commitment. And I think your autism with your narrow focus has a lot to do with that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. And, the fact I am a little bit crazy, I fully admit it.
Yeah, I think we all are on some level, especially if you read enough of these stories. I think it does change you some way. And for you, like you said, it brings you a level of self-awareness. I have to admit myself, I'm a little bit more like security focused with my home ever since my sister went missing. So that's kind of how it affected me. But I find what you do completely fascinating. And it's amazing to me that just one person, really just you, maintained this. So kudos to you. And great.
thank you.
Yeah, and what you do makes a big impact.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So that also asking, are there certain cases that are harder for you to work on than others by chance?
Well, it used to be, it's not happening anymore, but it used to be that every year the month of June was hard for me because that was the month that I was raped. And I remember one particular June, I was having to write up a case of a girl who was almost certainly raped and murdered by an acquaintance. And it was very disturbing to me, having to write this up, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. For the most part, I don't get bothered over much by the details of the cases I write, but some cases make me extremely angry. Child abuse, in particular, bothers me a lot. And there's one case in particular, a little boy who disappeared from Hawaii, he had been technically part of the Department of Human Services. He was like a foster kid technically, but he had been put back with his parents like on a trial basis to see how they did. And they were supposed to be supervised by the social services to see if they were doing a good job. Well, they weren't properly supervised. They were not doing a good job, and the kid disappeared. And years later, the Department of Human Services in Hawaii got a new director who said, we want transparency here. We want to admit to the public how badly we messed up in this child's case. And so we're releasing his entire normally confidential file to the public. And it was all available for download on PDF from their website, about 3,000 pages of it. And I sat down and stapled my butt to a chair and I read it all. All the details were there about the spiral fractures he had as an infant, where you can only get those if your limb is twisted until it breaks. Yeah, those are not accidents. And imagine doing that to a baby, and how he kept getting taken away from his parents and being sent back again to his parents. Round and round we go. And how badly he had suffered in his short and miserable life. And I was so angry, and I did not know if anybody was ever going to face charges in this case. So the only thing I could do was let everyone know what had happened to him and whose fault it was, how many people had failed him, and the identity of these people. And so I summarized his entire file in like 1,800 words. And now that file is no longer available. The only thing that's left is my summary. And in a way, I think I can give some small justice to victims of like domestic violence and child abuse if I write down, okay, this is what happened to them. And everyone can see, how much they suffered and who did it to them. And so at least everyone knows. And it also bothers me when a person, particularly a child, is missing for a long time and no one seems to notice. There was a little boy who disappeared from Baltimore under those circumstances. It was something like 2 years before his family finally realized he was gone. And this was like, I think he was like 6. He was never enrolled in school. He was never in contact with any social service agencies. He got passed around to various family members. I don't think any of them really wanted him. And when he dropped out of sight, no one noticed at all. And this happened in the 21st century. It's a modern day horror story. And if no one noticed him while he was there, I at least want people to notice that he's gone. And so he's on my site, and people can know what his story is, what little there is to know.
Well, it sounds to me like you're doing a really good job of bringing a voice to people who cannot speak for themselves. I mean, and that's
Thank you.
A very admirable job, Meaghan. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not popular with everyone. I like to show people as they are rather than how others would wish to see them. And I sometimes get in trouble for, I don't know, for example, I'll say this person, is addicted to drugs because they were. I mean, this is just a fact. And I'm not saying this to shame them. I'm just saying this is a fact. This is the medical condition they had. And then their family members sometimes get upset with me for because they're trying to protect the person's reputation or whatever. And I don't think that's really doing anyone any favors to eliminate pertinent information just because you're worried about someone looking bad.
I agree with you, and I'll share a real quick story about my sister's case, because we had a similar situation where just an internal group of people knew that she reported that she was possibly pregnant by an older man who was a person of interest in her case, and we didn't let anybody know until several years ago, which it had been over a decade in her case. And I think that in hindsight, for my family looking back, we should have released that information ahead of time. So I can say from personal experience, I understand people's perspective of not wanting to ruin their reputation or whatnot, but releasing as much information up front as possible is the best thing that you can do to get the full story out there, because people need to know the full story. And
I try to show empathy for the family members of the missing, even if they're upset with me, and even if I disagree with what they're doing. I don't really understand their situation. I've never been there. And
Sure.
So I don't want to be judging them for anything they do.
Thanks for sharing that with us. So where can people go to support Charley's project?
Well, there's a PayPal donation button. That's always helpful. I don't have a regular job because of my mental illnesses and the autism and stuff. I have a hard time working a regular job. I've worked before, but it really hasn't worked out very well for me, or for my employers for that matter. And there's also there's a Facebook page for it, and there's a Twitter account, and you can follow those. The Twitter account posts 2 missing persons from the Charley Project every day, just random ones I pick. And, just telling people about the Charley Project. I'm always happy to hear from people saying, I found out about your site. It's nice to be appreciated, Yeah, and people have provided all kinds of feedback to me. I had my site redesigned early this year, and I got a lot of feedback from people. And as a result of some of the feedback I got, the redesign kind of got tweaked here and there. And not every opinion is something that I am going to take and do what they want, but I'll listen to everything.
Take it into consideration for sure.
Yeah.
So, and it's charleyproject.org, right?
Yeah, Charley with an L-E-Y.
L-E-Y.
Because that was how Charlie Ross spelled his name.
Okay, and we'll put that up on the screen so our YouTube viewers can see that. And before we end the interview, Meaghan, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you very much for having me here. This is the first kind of interview I've done like this for YouTube.
Well, I'm just glad you agreed to speak with me. Like I said, we're a new channel, so we're hoping to get more interviews like this with people that are heavily involved in the missing person realm. And, it's a very sad situation for a lot of families, but I think that the information just needs to get out there in a format that people are consuming it in. So I appreciate your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meaghan.